Hi, welcome to my video on the inverse trig functions. And this video is on arc cotangent. And as in all previous videos, we'll look at the unit circle who has a radius of 1. So this is 0, so this is 1 comma 0. This is 90, so this is x is 0, y is 1. And this is 180, x is negative 1. Y is 0, and at 270 x is 0, y is negative 1, and x is associated. So when we do x theta, x is, cos theta is associated with the x, sine theta is the y. So on a unit circle, cos theta, that's theta there, is the x, and sine theta is the y on the unit circle. So let's look at the graph of y equals cot theta. And cot is cos theta over sine theta. So that means that if you have sine theta equal to 0, that means cot is undefined. So sine is 0, sine is the y, so it's 0 at, the y is 0 at 0, so that's a vertical asymptote right here. And it's also 0 at 180, so it's a vertical asymptote. So that's every 180, so 360 is a vertical asymptote. Negative 180 is a vertical asymptote every 180. Negative 360 is the vertical asymptote. So if you did the cot of, say, 180, the cos of 180 is negative 1. The sine of 180 is 0, so it's undefined. Now, the cot graph, the tan graph goes this way, but the cot graph goes the reverse. So the cot graph goes down here into the 90 and on like this. So if you did the cot of 90, you would get a 0. And so the cot graph repeats like this. So this is the cot graph repeating, and it goes there. And as in all of these, we want to look at its inverse. So the inverse of cot, we have to draw a horizontal line, and the horizontal line passes through many points on the curve, so the inverse is not a function, so we have to restrict. So in terms of the cot graph, they restrict it at 0, vertical asymptote, and 180. So this is the piece of the graph that they restricted over the interval of 0 to 180. So this graph, this is the restriction. So in this restriction, your domain will be from 0 less than theta less than 180. And notice there's no equal sign here because there's asymptotes. And the range is up and down, so the range is reals. So we're going to look at the inverse. So let's look at the 45 also before we look at this. The cot of 45, let's say 45 is here. The cot would be, this would be a 45 comma 1. And right here would be a 135 degree angle right here, and that would be negative 1. So I'm going to do the inverse of this. So we changed around. So that means that your domain becomes your range. So it goes from 0 to 180. So your domain is your range, and your reals is range here, reals, becomes your domain. So that means these vertical asymptotes become horizontal asymptotes at 0 and at 180. So there's horizontal asymptotes. Again, when you reflect here in this line, this is the line that's doing the reflecting. You're reflecting in this line, then your vertical asymptote become horizontal. And no, this, I'm going to plot these 2 points here. So that means that 45, 1 becomes 145. So that's right there. So that's 1 giving you 45 degrees. And this one right here is 135, gives you negative 1. So that means a negative 1 gives you 135. So that's right there. So did I say 145? Well, that dot is not right there, because this is 90 here. So 45 is here. So 145 is right there. So that point is right there. This point here, there's 90 to 180. 135 is here, and negative 1. So the graph is, if I can just do this. So there's the inverse. Right there. The inverse right here. And so this is, the graph here is theta is cot to the negative 1 on the y. So it's reversed. So your domain is your range, and your range is your domain. So your domain here is reals. The range here is your domain, and your domain is your range. There it is. And you have to keep that in mind. Now, I showed you that trick that we did before with the graph. So this graph right here that I've cut the restriction on, I've taken this graph and copied it on this sheet of paper, on this grid. So all these points are the same. Notice the vertical asymptotes cutting at 180 and 0. There they are. There's the curve. Now, I'm going to pick this piece of paper up, put it in my hand, and I'm going to reflect it. Now, the line is up, very straight up through the middle, is at the end of my fingertips. So I'm going to reflect it in that line. So just curl it around, and there's his inverse right there, which is right here. So this point is 145 right here. This point right here is, this point is negative 135 right here. This point right here, that's a 0, 90, and this point right here is 90, gives you 0. So that's his inverse. Okay, let's continue. Let's do some exercise pertaining to those inverses. Here we go. So what I did, I reproduced the graph. I didn't reproduce the inverse. I reproduced where I cut off the restrictions. So the restrictions are at 0 to 180. Remember, cot is cos theta over sine theta. So it's restricted at 0 and 180. And I keep this in mind. This is easier to do. Drawing the graph off its inverse can be more confusing. So I keep this in mind, 0 to 180 with the restrictions on the graph. That means, looking at this graph, any angle between 0 and 90, you're going to have a positive number. So if you do the reverse, and have a positive number, that means the angle got to be between 0 and 90. If you have a number that's between below 0, which means is negative, that means the angle got to be for got to be between 90 and 180. And to illustrate that, let's look at some examples. What about the cot of 225? The cot of 225 is right over here. 225 is right here. Draw a terminal arm, put the perpendicular to the x-axis. 225 is 180, so this is a 45, so the reference angle is 45, 45. So this is a 1, 1, root 2. X is negative and y is negative. So the cot is the cos over the sine, or the cot is the adjacent over the opposite. So in relation to 45, the adjacent is negative 1. 45 is here. Adjacent is negative 1. The opposite is negative 1. So that works out to be 1. So the cot of 225 is 1. What about the cot of 405? Start here at 0. 405 is 405. And you take off 360. You get a 45. So 405 is 360 plus 45. So it's really right around from here, right on around to here. Start here, right around 360 and 45 more. So this is 405. Again, the reference angle is 45. That's a 45. And we have a 1 root 2 isosceles right triangle. And again, the cot is adjacent over opposite, and the adjacent of this 45 is 1. Opposite is 1, which comes out to be 1. Now, what about the arc cot of 1? So if we do the arc cot of 1, right here, 1 is right here. So the arc cot has to be an angle between 0 and 90. So arc cot of 1 is here. So the arc cot of 1, and again, the diagram not drawn exact, is going to be the 45 degree angle. It's not 225. It's not 405. It has to be, if you have 1 on this graph, 1 is right here, then it has to be this angle between 0 and 90, so it has to be the reference angle of 45, which is 45. It's converted, 45 times pi over 180. 45 once, 45 is 4. There are 4 45s, so pi divided by 4 is 45. Now, what about the cot of 150? Let's start here and rotate 90, 150. It stays about right here. So that's a 150 degree rotation. Draw the terminal arm, perpendicular to the x-axis. So that's 150 as far as here. Then this is the 30, so the central angle is 30. Reference angle is 30. This angle is 60. So we have a 1, a root 3, and a 2. And in this second quadrant, the x is negative, the y is positive, and the hypotenuse is always positive. So cot, again, is the adjacent over the opposite. Sine is opposite over adjacent, so is the adjacent over the opposite. In relation to the 30, the adjacent is negative root 3. Opposite is 1, which is negative root 3. Now what about the cot of 330? 330 degrees starts here, all the way around 90, 180, 270, and right to here. So there's the rotation for 330, right to here. Terminal arm, perpendicular to the x-axis. So that's 330 degrees. This is 30. So the reference angle is 30. This angle is 60, 90. Again, this is a 1 opposite 30. This is root 3, and this is 2. In this quadrant, x is positive, y is negative, hypotenuse is always positive. And adjacent over opposite, in relation to the reference angle, adjacent is root 3. Opposite is negative 1, which is negative root 3. So 150 cot, 330 cot gives me negative root 3 over 3. But what about when we do arc cot? Cot to the negative 1, arc cot of negative root 3. Negative root 3, square root of 3 is 1.7, let's say. So that's a negative 1.7. That's negative 1 here, 1.7 is here. So this angle has to be between 90 and 180. So between 90 and 180, this angle has to be up here. So it has to be, reference angle is still the same. So it has to be 150 degrees. Because we did the 150. And so we got the same answer again, because that has to be between 90 and 180, has to be in the second quadrant. And 150 in terms of the radians is multiplied by pi over 180. Zeros cancel. 3 into that goes 5, 3 into that goes 6. So 150 is 5 pi over 6 as a radian. Now let's do these two. What about the arc cot of root 3 over 3? So root 3 over 3 sounds like a 30, 60, 90. 1, root 3, and 2. And so the cot, again, is the adjacent over the opposite. So the adjacent over the opposite to give you root 3 over 3. Adjacent to 30 would be root 3 over 1. So that's not it. So it has to be the 60. And it has to be, if it's a positive number, with root 3 over 3 is a positive number, it has to be between 0 and 90. That means it has to be in the first quadrant. Perpendicular. So the, again, adjacent is 1 over root 3, so this has to be a 60 degree angle. 1 root 3, 2. And so the cot is the adjacent over the opposite, and we rationalize that, and we have root 3 over 3. So this has to be a 60 degree angle. And 60 degrees multiplied by pi over 180, 60 once, 63, so 60 degrees is pi over 3. Pi divided by 3 is 60. And we have the arc cot of negative 1, and we look up here and find that a negative 1 is, arc cot of a negative 1 is, negative 1 is right here. So that angle is here, and that means if it's a negative 1, that means we have to have it between 90 and 180. So between 90 and 180, it's right here, and cot and tan are ones on the 45 right triangle. So this is a 45, 45. So this is x is 1, y is 1, and that's a root 2. X is negative, y is positive. So to get the negative 1, we have to have a 45 degree angle, but this rotation to here is 135. So we do plot 135 degrees. This reference angle in this quadrant has a reference angle of 45 and 45. And so a negative 1 is the adjacent, which is negative 1, over opposite, which is 1, negative 1. So the 45 degree reference angle in that quadrant turns out to be a 135 degree angle. So the arc cos of a negative 1 is 135. And 135 multiplied by pi over 180, that 40, I can reduce by 5, or I can say 45, so it's 3 45s. So 45 to the net goes 3, 45 to the net goes 4. So it's a 3 pi over 4. Number is 135. Pi over 4 is 45. So 3 times 45 is 135. Because the reference angle is 45, that means this theta divided, or sorry, pi divided by 4 is a 45. So 45 in degrees is pi over 4 in radians. So that means this answer is a multiple of the 45, which is 3 of them. So that brings us to the end of the video on the inverse of cot. So I hope you like my video. Click the like button, click the subscribe button, visit my math website www.mathfullyexplained.com to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. That's the content on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Just one word. Thank you for viewing my video. Hope the video helped you. Bye bye.